One-man team here. All right.
Solid.
All right, we're on.
Hey,
David?
hey, Candy. Thank you for having me on here. Thanks
Of
for
course.
sharing your platform with me.
I'm really excited. I think I never had somebody on with your profession. So I think I want to start with that.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Yeah, lead the way. We know each other from the farmers markets mainly. That's where I'm at every Sunday. And as far as what I do, I'm in the natural world of farming and mainly beekeeping. So I really focus on that and the importance of bringing raw product and really wholesome food to the table that's offered through the farmers markets. I've been on and off. As far as my background, I grew up in a farm. This was back in Mexico, so I'm originally from that part of the world, and we were farmers that lived off the land. We foraged for wild berries and fruits, and so that was the way of life. And so then that always was something that I resonated with even when I got here. My grandfather was a beekeeper too, so I have a long history with that. And I have some memories of helping him out when he was doing it. I didn't get involved as much then because I was young. And then from that, I started getting introduced back into beekeeping here in the United States and got involved with that and then started doing small scale honey production. We also have a service through Bee Wild Collective. That's the name of my company. We humanely remove beehives from people's properties. And so we get the call and we go out there and we're gladly to be there before the pest control shows up and kills bees. And so a little bit about that and what I'm currently doing. So yeah, I'm excited to go on deeper into this topic.
Yeah, I it's crazy because growing up in Austria, I mean, it was just normal that my mom goes to the market almost I think, every other day. It's not like a once a week thing. It's more like instead of going to the supermarket, she would always go to the market. So for me, growing up, I guess it was very normal. I never questioned where my eggs come from or where my water comes from or my honey. So for me, I guess moving to the States, I had to educate myself. Where do my food comes from? And yeah, I think most people are not aware of organic from the supermarket to like organic from the farmer's market. Or what I learned from you is that you can't even call it organic because they put such a high price on that. I really would, yeah. Can you explain that?
So we were talking about how last time we spoke about the organic
Mm-hmm.
labeling. So this is often we'll start off with honey. So there's a lot of honeys out there on the shelves that will be labeled organic, and not to say they're not, but it's very hard to label a honey organic because we don't have control of what the bees do. They can go out and forage on different flowers. Some of those flowers or pastures, whatever's out there, might contain some drift as far as Roundup or herbicides. So they're getting into that and they're bringing that back. So that already is really, it's going to make it challenging to label a honey organic. However, I believe that there is a way to do it if you have wild spaces, whether it's up in the mountains for people that are maybe beekeeping down in the Amazon when there's not much of that stuff going on in terms of pesticides and deforestation and spraying. So that's kind of the approach that we take here with our scale of beekeeping is sticking to wild spaces, and that way are you feel better and more comfortable about the honeys that you're bringing in, the way that you're harvesting it. So that applies to honey. I also think that it also applies to eggs and different poultry, as that's something that I sell at the stand as well. These days, you can be buying eggs that are labeled organic, but the chickens are living in cages, and so that never made any sense to me. So that's kind of the challenges around the labeling that you have to be cautious about, and that applies to vegetables too.
Yeah. So you're saying they would label it organic, but the bees would still maybe eat fields that are sprayed with like glyphosate.
Right. Well, there is ways of testing your honey.
Okay.
So if you're testing your honey and there's none of that coming up, then you're safe to do that. But it's for one, it's very expensive, and second, I think that it's really hard to stay away from these places that are spraying.
Yeah, but they would still be able to call it organic.
I feel like there is a little bit of mislabeling going on, or false advertising when it comes to that.
Yeah.
They're stamping it on there, and I don't want to say I'm like 100% sure on that, but I do feel like that, especially when I see honey in plastic too.
Okay.
Like honey shouldn't be in plastic.
Yeah, and I've seen Hanukkah honey, like $50 in plastic in Whole Foods.
Right.
Yeah.
That made no sense to me. I'd like to even maybe reach out to them and be like, you have a wonderful product here. Give us some glass, even if we have to pay more.
Yeah.
And so I live by that motto of glass. Don't put things that are don't put honey in plastic because it can leach onto the honey. I've even tasted it before where you get a jar of honey in plastic and you can taste the plastic.
So what does that mean, organic? Or what is it supposed to mean?
Well, organic, in terms of honey?
Yeah. Or yeah.
It's completely wild, clean, nothing in the honey, such as impurities. So that's what honey should be. Just a nice, local, raw, unfiltered honey.
Yeah. But so you're saying they label it organic, but you cannot control really where the bee goes, and you don't even know. And I bet they can travel some distance.
Bees normally travel 3 to 4 to maybe 5 miles from, that's their perimeter from their hive.
Yeah.
And so based on what's in that surrounding area, that's what they're going to be foraging for.
Okay.
So 3, 4, 5 miles. If you do have a safe spot that you know nothing's happening around you, then you can take that approach and call it organic. But I think you still have to send it into the laboratory and get it tested.
Damn.
Right. Yeah.
And then what about with the chickens? You said you call it organic, but they're still in cages?
Yeah, so I see a lot of generic brands out there. Like even Sprouts, the other day I was looking at what eggs they have. And I really think that in order to truly be a free-range pasture-raised organic farm, it's got to be kept in a small scale. And what I mean by that is when you see these commercial companies just going really big with their production, I think at some point it's you lose sight of the quality, and you lose integrity when it comes to your practices. So it's really hard to keep up with that kind of infrastructure. And so I think what we're seeing now is people gravitating more towards those small farms that are cared for, that are kept clean. Hygiene is also another thing that it's important to all that. Soil health, on the regenerative side of things, people really enjoy that aspect of having that.
Man, that's crazy. And you can really, I mean, even if you buy organic eggs, you can taste and even see the difference on the different colors of the yolk than when I buy it from you from the farmer's market, where you can even the eggs itself have different sizes, different colors, and the yolks as well. You know, some are a little bit more yellow, some a little bit more orange, and the taste, I mean, is incredible.
Yeah, and that's how it should be. Yeah. You should always have a variety. Yeah, when we think of food forest or small scale farming, generally when you keep it that way, there's a little bit of many different things. But as you mentioned, the size of the eggs change. There's a little bit of quail eggs here, duck eggs here. Certain times of the year, those are not there because they slow down. Also, maintaining an heirloom variety of chickens allows you to have all these different varieties, such as, the colors that you see that come from our table. You'll notice too, like with the approach that we take. We'll bring in pomegranates, like right now. We'll have some cactus, prickly pear. And so the approach to creating a food forest is to have many different things that complement each other, and they come in different seasons. And so I get excited when I see all these different things on the table. It's like, here's the pomegranates that are small, some are big. And so I love to see variety.
Have you ever thought about living in the city or no?
I have considered the city in previous years just because I know sometimes I can see why people want to be in the city. There's more opportunities here. There's ways of connecting. I guess it also depends on what field you're in. But no, I don't think I could live in the city. I enjoy coming here, but I like to get back to Santa Barbara and enjoy all that is happening there. It's a small town, but it's solid. I've had a I've been there about 24 years. It's been good to me. I've been able to create a solid, stable life for myself there. The community is really supportive of agriculture up there. A lot of the farmers you see here at the farmers markets are from up north in that area. And I think I'm good for now there. But I am open to other ideas.
Did you know in Austria the farmers market are cheaper than the supermarkets compared to in America where it's like a luxury and it's actually more expensive?
I did not know that, but it makes sense why it would be cheaper.
Yeah.
I think that was the case here in the United States as well at some point.
Yeah.
That you went to the farmers markets because you were going to find the better deals there. I'm not sure at what point that started changing. I think it might also have to do with just the demand that presents itself here in the bigger cities. So that it might be due to that. I also think that sometimes small farmers are in positions where they are not making a lot of money. They're kind of living, close by paycheck to paycheck because they're having to upkeep with their infrastructure. And also, fees are getting higher for us and for coming down here. That's including gas and all of that. So that's one thing that I've noticed.
Yeah. Do you follow how it gets? Do you think it's getting more difficult and more difficult to be like an independent farmer?
I think it is. Yeah, I mean, you see the attack on farmers around the world. The Netherlands was a perfect example of what we saw out there. We haven't seen it so much here in California yet, but I do think that there's this, idea that somehow farmers need to become corporate or they need to take some kind of incentive from the bigger guys at the top and join forces with them. So I think that that could be something that might change. As of now, though, I think really it's important for us to vote with our dollars. And so the community does that by showing up to the markets and supporting these farmers. And so we're in a position where we're showing up to LA 3 times a week and it's worth it and it's consistent.
Yeah, we're like in a health crisis where people are obese, unhealthy, everything is processed. I mean, I can't even send my kid to public school because the school lunches are crazy. And nobody's eating eggs and meat. Everything is processed and has like 50 ingredients and coloring and makes us super addictive and sugar and refined everything. And yeah, I think it's beautiful that it's really terrible on the one side, but then on the other side, you see this need for farmers market and glass and water and people are getting. I think it's like a yin and yang how the universe works. So the unhealthier they make the products, and the more colorful they make it, the more parents and people get aware of like, yeah, what do I what do I put in my body? And I think you can really tell how the farmers markets are growing, right? The demand and the need for healthy things, especially when everybody's getting sick constantly.
I agree. I think in the last 4 years, we've really been able to see how flawed our system is when it comes to the food that we're consuming. I look back at what I was eating in elementary school and junior high and even all the way up to high school. And I'd like to call that completely garbage, because there was no nutritional value behind that. And with not, I'm not a medical expert, but I just, it's common sense that we're supposed to be feeding our children wholesome foods that are good for them in those prime stages of development. Adding on to what you said, I think the farmers markets are a really nice way to inform people, and the platform that has become does allow these conversations to take place. Like, what do I need to do? How do I feed myself better? They know where the meat is coming from. They know the farmers that are consciously harvesting the animals. They're moving away from buying the processed food. And I think it's a slow process for some people, but I've also seen on the other side where the moment people find out about what's in their food or they actually start reading the labels, then they make that quick transition to like, okay, I'm going to eat this way and I'm not going to give that to my children. It's a nice way to also see kids engage with the farmers there. We build connections. The kids come, they taste the honey. So I think it's really important to take your children to the farmers market so that they can engage and know where this is coming from. And it's a lifestyle ultimately. You go to the farmers market once a week.
Yeah.
You haul whatever you need to get, and we cook it at home. I'm really also an advocate for just like cook your own food and try to do it as much as possible, because that's how you're going to know what's in your food.
Especially when every restaurant cooks with seed oils.
Yeah, that's a hard one.
Yeah, because we use an app called Seed Oil Scout, but it's very, I mean, it's in the works where there's some things that pop up and then they change it and then they're like, oh, somebody found this and that, and then yeah. But I think like people, they wanna pay. I wanna pay more that they use beef tallow or butter for my eggs, or yeah, like I think the hospital bill. We always say the hospital bill will be much higher than the farmers market eggs. You got to see the big picture, and you gotta, I don't know, the longer you are on your like health journey, the more you also feel how you feel consuming bad shit or good shit. So I feel like when I was younger, you just consume and you don't really think about it, and you get away with so much, especially as a kid. I mean, you get away with drinking Gatorade and eating corn dogs, but I mean, everybody, like, as an adult, you realize how bad that is. So as a parent, I think you have a big responsibility, especially now that you feed your children. I think for us, that really exploded this like need to educate yourself, because you're so responsible for another human being that you might be irresponsible with yourself, but once you have a little being, you really want to find out what you feed this little being. And when you look into children food, it's devastating. It's insane how it almost seems evil. And I know most corporations are just out for making money, but it becomes evil when you don't care what happens cognitively and to those children. Kind of like it's really sad, and I really hope to shed more awareness, because like maybe you should care, I think, what you consume.
I agree with you 100%. I think it's really disturbing when we actually look at it into this depth of seeing how these companies strategically market this candy in a way that is appealing to these kids with all these colors and all these different things. And you see what it's doing to our society. It's causing obesity everywhere. Children that are really young are already diabetic. I see it even sometimes. Like just recently, I was visiting my brother in Oregon, and his kids are there, and we have a really good connection. But they want to go get those Slurpees from 7-Eleven. They want to go get, the Skittles late at night. Like this drive. You can see the addiction, and I certainly have eaten Skittles and stuff like that. So I'm not gonna say that that's not something I did, but as a grown up now, I see it, and it's like, wow, like this stuff is so addicting. I was fortunate enough to not have too much of that in my life and as my food, because with the background that I have, as we can both relate, we come from backgrounds where the food was grown by ourselves, or we went to someone that was raising, cattle, and they had a harvest, so we're gathering our food. A lot of this stuff wasn't in my life. There was no Coca Cola. It was because we lived in a small farm, so everything that we had there and what we grew, we ate. So growing up in that way allowed me to just kind of really take in all the good foods, all the raw milks, the artisanal cheeses that my grandfather would make that I wish I could continue to do, but I lost kind of sight of that. And so I was fortunate enough to have my mother sending me off to school most of the time with home cooked meals. And also after school, a meal was prepared. So that helped me a lot, just kind of stay in that without drifting away too much into the artificial flavorings and all that. I do think that there's agenda in place through the food, whether it's corporate greed and they're just here to make us consume garbage and not allowing us to be our true selves. And that comes in forms of being in optimal health and how we think. That's all, correlation to what we're putting in our gut. You know very well of that. And so I'm still learning as I go, but it's apparent that we need to, really check our foods before we put them in our bodies.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's Halloween today, which is like the mecca for going from house to house and collecting refined sugar. All these holidays, even birthdays, it's insane that we've like cultivated eating shit and rewarding ourselves and our children. And every time I go to a kid's birthday, I am just shocked on how normalized it gets, and all the kids are eating coloring and sugar, and then their personality changes immediately. Yeah, and we've just cultivated it so much that like it's normal that there's cake, there's muffins and icing, and there's so much candy and all these innocent. They don't know any better, and I think, yeah, as a like I wish my parents or it was always like don't eat that or don't do that, instead of like really telling you like if you eat that this will happen, and this like treat it like cigarettes. With cigarettes, they told us why it's bad to smoke, not just don't smoke, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
I think like as a society, we really need to, because like I always, if somebody would have explained to me what sugar does in the human body, I think it's much more understandable why my parents wouldn't want me to eat that, because it just seems like they don't want me to eat something sweet because they want me to eat something else before that. So I think the education thing is key for making people understand, and I think that's why podcasts are so great, because you can really change your mind or even change your nutrition and your whole diet. Like once I've talked to a couple of people, they completely changed my mind. I had this one carnivore doctor on, who only eats meat, and that sounds crazy at first. he eats all animal products. So he also eats honey, which is cool, and dairy. But when you listen to him, you really grasp a different perspective, and then you can really change your mind more than when somebody just like tells you like, don't do this, don't do that. Yeah. Have you tried carnivore?
I haven't tried carnivore like 100%, but I'm definitely in that spectrum of like meat, raw milk, cheese, and eggs.
Yeah.
And there's some fruits involved mainly in there. But it's interesting you mentioned it because lately I also listened to a podcast on that, and it was just highlighting the importance and with factual information and evidence that's there to support why we were designed to consume these types of foods. The way I was raised, it was that cheese, you know, raw milk, meat, poultry, some wild game occasionally. And then there was a few like legumes that we were growing, and fruits and things like that. But it was somewhat of an ancestral diet that we were consuming based off our region. And it would make sense why, if you do grow up in that type of region, why would you change it down the road? To more of like, I mean, I've gone sucked into like even just the plant-based diet when I was younger, and it's in the mainly because as we grow up, we're finding ways to optimize our health, and so we hear all these different ideas. We're getting pulled this way, that way, and ultimately it comes in full circle, which you realize that it's like, no, this is what's been working for me, and I don't think it's a right or wrong answer as far as how you go, but I do think that some of us, we clearly see what's working for us. So I'm definitely excited to experiment with that a bit more. I notice one thing for sure that has changed is just the energy, the joint pain that has gone away from not eating some of these nightshades and all these vegetables that come off as a healthy food, but if once you actually look at them, like we kind of bred them into what they are now. They're not really as wild as they should be. Also, I've been reading a book by Sally K. Norton, which talks about the oxalates in these plants that can cause a lot of havoc in our health. And at the same time, when you take an approach to this more ancestral diet, I think it's even easier to just keep record of what you're doing with your health.
Yeah. He points out that like if you go to the farmer's market and you know where it actually comes from, your vegetables or your fruit, then it's not so bad. But for most people, if they, like you said, like the organic doesn't mean organic, and if you eat vegetables that are sprayed and you cut that out, you just instantly feel better. Even if the meat might not be, he says, even if the meat is not the highest quality because you can't afford it, it's better to eat like cheaper meat than to eat cheap vegetables who are completely sprayed with these chemicals. And he makes a good point, and I personally just feel much better if 90% is from animals. It's not like a religion where you can't have like once in a while some pasta or some gluten-free something. But I would say that like 80-90% of my nutrition comes from an animal. Yeah.
How long have you been doing that for now?
I think it was on and off, but like maybe a year, something like that.
Okay.
More strictly, ever since I met that doctor, he really changed my mind because he was doing knee surgeries and he started changing people's nutrition, and then to do less surgery. And then he got in a huge fight with the hospital, and they wanted to sue him because he changed people's nutrition and told them to change their diet, and a lot of issues went away, and a lot of surgeries went away, and the hospital was not interested in that. And then he wrote the book, the Carnivore Diet, and it's just amazing to see him. He's so fit and so strong and so big. and old, and it's impressive. And he's been doing it for many years, and he has a much better medical understanding, and he does blood work, and it's very interesting. But yeah, I believe if you truly know where your vegetables and your fruit come from, you're fine. It's just when you think you're eating organic, but actually you're really not, because they cheat a little bit around it. You might still like eat a lot of chemicals.
Yeah, that's the case. Also, the tillage that goes on with some of these practices and the approach to farming, depletes the nutrients in the vegetables. So you don't really want that. Going back to the medical setting, yeah, it's a sad situation. I used to work at a hospital. I was there for about 9 years, and I got to see all the ins and outs of nutrition, the back end, what's going on with the doctors and what approach they're taking.
What were you doing there?
So, right out of high school, I started working. They have the Cottage Hospital in Santa Barbara. They have a deli, and so I started working there in food service. And I was just prepping food. I was serving the food, customer service, making coffees. I was a barista as well. At the same time, Cottage Hospital started to do their own farmers markets, which was really nice to see at that time. They did it for the employees and for people that were in the area that knew of it. So I started actually leading the way as far as setting up the tables and, talking to some of the farmers that were coming in and distributing this food for us. So I did that for about 2 years. And then after the nutrition department, I went over to the recovery room and post-anesthesiology. It was completely different from what I was doing. Now I'm doing care for the patients. I'm at the bedside with the nurses, helping all these different individuals coming in for different procedures. And that was quite an interesting take, because it did seem to me at the time like an assembly line of just, push these procedures, do this. I would never really hear doctors talk about nutrition. And sadly, I mean, if you look at them too, and I don't mean to say that in a bad way, but, if any person that I consider a doctor, they have to be, leading the way by example, the way they look and the way they're eating. So I didn't take much of. I do remember one time too going to a primary doctor while I was still working. So I never went to doctors, but since we did have health insurance, we're like, well, okay, let's jump on this and make the best out of these benefits. And I was looking for a primary doctor, and it was so random, but also wild, and it goes to show you how things work. First thing, I walk into his office, and he's drinking a Diet Pepsi. Nothing against that, but to me, immediately, I'm like, what I look for in a health professional has to be different. There's something going on here that's not going to be aligned with me. So anyways, not to go off too much into that, after the recovery room, I worked in the emergency department, and I did administration, billing insurances. Also just got to see the dark side of what that is, and the numbers that circulate the medical system. And then that was about, 2 years there in the emergency department, and then COVID happened. And so I was already a beekeeper on the side. I was already doing farmers markets on the weekends. And so when I saw what was happening inside the hospital, and, also the forced inoculations that came after that, I decided to part ways for good. And so now I'm doing this. And so it's been an interesting journey in the last 5 years or so now. And so I'm in a much better place. I feel much better. I'm not sitting in a, cubicle under fluorescent lights for 10 hours. I'm outdoors now, enjoying the sun, seeing the animals, got my hands in the dirt, and also just at a grassroots creating a solid community of like-minded individuals. So I'm extremely thankful for this change, and I'm also thankful that I didn't listen to other peers that were saying, "Don't leave. You got the best job right now. It's COVID, and if you get sick, you'll be promised a ventilator." I'm like, I have no interest in that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm all about the natural world now, and there's some challenges that come with anything, as you know, but just extremely thankful for what I'm doing now, and there's so much to learn still.
Why would you say is there so little meat at the farmers market? Like there's barely any meat. There's so much vegetables, plants, so much plants, but a tiny amount of meat.
Because you need some serious acreage to be into animal husbandry. Maybe not so much for chickens, but for like, beef, lamb, pork, some wild game. You need some serious acreage, and so it's not easy for all farmers to all of a sudden go into that. It's much easier growing vegetables.
Yeah.
But it's also heartbreaking in seeing just how some of these people kill themselves out in the fields working these jobs. Also, because these days you're not allowed to process your own animals. So you have to go through different processing facilities, and they charge a lot of money for that. So by the time that you ship off your cows or your goats or whatever to the processing facility, they get packaged up and all of that. They come back, and you're having to pay a lot of money for that. And by the time you sell your product, you're barely breaking even. So that's a major challenge right there, is that these agencies are all up in our business when it comes to how we do things as small farmers.
And is it true that you wild game cannot be like cut or processed at the same facility as like beef or chicken or other
I
meat?
actually didn't know that.
Because I remember I was in Texas and we were hunting deer, and I think you can't just bring it to like a beef processor. You have to bring it to a game processor because like there's all these different regulations and laws, and like every time you go, it's really hard to find like wild like game animals to eat. I prefer bison, venison, elk. It's amazing. I prefer that because I know you can't cage that animal. It will run and it will eat the most lush forests, and then it will get shot in a heartbeat, and it won't get executed in a line. There's not a elk line that gets executed with like a headshot. So for me, and it also tastes like it gives me a different feeling of eating that than eating like chicken or turkey or any other animal. Yeah, there's like almost they say like there's a story behind it, and there's I can you can see there's no it's not watery. Venison is like so muscular, and it's amazing.
Well, these animals live on forever through us after consumption.
Yeah.
And also, when individuals like you and I are more conscious about where we're getting our meats, I think there's a much more meaningful spiritual connection. And so that says a lot. And of course, the food is going to taste better. The meats are going to taste better, much more superior because of the way they're living. That's another challenging aspect of farming, is that you raise your animals and then eventually you have to ship them off to get slaughtered on an unknown location. Like, that creates a lot of tension and stress on the animal. And for us, like, in order to really be respectful about what that means to take another life, I think we should be able to keep our animals where they are and what they know, and do it in a way that's also humane. And so we don't know what's going on in these processing facilities. We don't know what kind of things they're using. I mean, you could be you could be buying chlorinated chickens and a lot of different things that we just don't see, based off the standards that are required for these processing facilities. So I think that's one reason why you don't see, a lot of meats at the farmers markets.
Yeah. And especially no game. I'm always on the lookout, but
Yeah,
it's no game animals. Yeah.
I'll give you a couple of leads on one of our friends from Santa Barbara, Casitas Pastures. He has some wild game occasionally, like rabbit. He'll bring in guinea fowl. But yeah, in terms of wild game, I don't even think that would be allowed at the farmers market. Also, because it has to do with the agriculture department oversees this. So I've even learned recently, for example, and this applies to wild mushrooms. There's a farm that grows amazing food and they're organic, and they know a source of where to forage for chanterelle mushrooms in the Santa Barbara area, but they can't sell it at the farmers market because it's not something that they're growing on their property. These are wild forage mushrooms. So I learned that recently. I'm like, well, why aren't you able to bring something that you know where it's at? And so you are limited to what you can do with your expertise as a farmer. You have to abide by these rules.
And then tell me why your eggs are not organic, labeled organic.
Well, it's an expensive procedure to get certified organic. And also, we've been doing things at a small scale since day one. So the quality of our eggs speak for themselves. And I do think that if you do want to go and spend the money to get certified organic, then you need to everybody should be held accountable for the organic label. But if you go get certified organic and then there's a farm that's also that, but they're not actually practicing organic ways of doing things at the farm, then why should we go and spend the money on that? I think the next certification that's really going to pave the way, as I told you before, I think it's certified regenerative. There's a few farms out there, and that's some strict implementations that are on the table by having this certification. And I think that's where we all want to head into regenerative, non tillage, humanely raised animals.
So when it says organic, you don't think much of it?
I do. I don't want to discredit that word completely. I think organic still has a lot of credibility, but I just don't know where it's at in terms of false advertising. And even just recently, a couple of people come up to the farmers market and they said, "Did you hear about this company?" I forget what the name of that company is, but they're Vital Farms. And apparently, there's some information that is going out there that they're not what they're claiming to be. So I don't really claim to know anything about that farm in particular, but there has been some information that's brought up to my attention as far as what do I think about those people. So you just don't know. I mean, it's also you got to be at a really large scale to provide that kind of quantity. And I think once you get to that level, you kind of lose sight and you start taking shortcuts. But I like to think that, there are people out there wanting to do their best, even at the highest level of commercial farming.
Yeah, I don't know if with just cities, it's just so hard to fit that demand and keep everybody healthy. It's a very dystopian way of living in these very condensed cities where everybody needs food, everybody needs so many things. So it's very unnatural, I guess, too. Because like you said, you would just back in the day you would eat what the farmers around you would make. There's no eating exotic like fruit all year long, right? We want like exotic fruit all year long. We want fish and every meat and sushi and all this stuff. So it makes no sense really.
Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't. I don't think these big cities are natural either. We're not supposed to live in these cramped cities, concrete jungles. It doesn't feel right. You see what's going on here in LA. That's kind of the sad reality about the farmers markets in terms of the location. Because, when I show up on Sundays, it's around 6 o'clock and you have people sleeping on the streets and it's a sad situation. And then security guards come in and they clean up everything and then they get these people out of there. We set up and then this whole place gets transformed into what you see when you go. And then we pack up and back to what it was. And so it's heartbreaking to just see the conditions that we're living under, and it's a parallel universe through the suffering and also through the abundance. So
Tell me more about the bees.
okay, yeah. Any specific questions you have for me about the bees?
How long have you been doing the bees?
I've been doing the bees for about 10 solid years.
Wow.
So the way that happened was that, as I've already shared with you, I have a background with family being beekeepers. Then I came here to the United States and, kind of forgot about that. Just started focusing more on, okay, what do I want to do? I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to be a doctor, which would have never worked out for me because I did terrible in school. And so initially I got introduced back, and it was a funny story actually. So this is when I was working at the deli that I told you about. There was a gentleman there that would come in and clean up the facility, and we started talking. I would give him some food, and we got close. And then eventually one day after work, he's like, "Hey, son, do you have time to help me with some boxes?" And I thought he's an older gentleman, so I thought he just needed help with moving some boxes. And so we get in his car, we go up this road that takes you to an avocado orchard. And we're going, and, we get there, and he says, this is what we're going to do. We're actually going to take care of bees, and we're going to harvest some honey today. I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want to scare you off. And he's a very funny individual. So the way he was saying it, he was also laughing. And I was completely excited about that. It was, okay, cool. Let's do it. So all he gave me was a veil for my face, which had a bunch of holes. So we went in there, and the first time that we went in there, I got stung like 30 times. But the way it started is like, okay, we're going to pull some honey off right here on the spot. Very old school. Like, you normally don't harvest your honey at the spot because bees would just get all over you and in the honey. And so we just had to do it, but we're sitting there scraping. I have videos of it. We have scraping the honey off the frames, like the frame that I have out there. I'll go more into what that is, but we just started doing it on the spot. And so, all that happened. We went home. I'm full of honey. My stomach is hurting because I ate so much honeycomb. And I was just so excited. I felt like a child because it's like, okay, it triggers something. I was like, this is what I was doing when I was a kid. And like, how cool is this? And why haven't I been introduced to bees sooner? So I kept helping him on the weekends and just kept showing up and being there for support, taking his lead. And then eventually he gave me 2 of my own hives. He's like, hey, you've done a lot of work for me. Here's 2 hives that you can take with you to one of your properties. And so from there, I started just gaining more knowledge, getting comfortable with what beekeeping is, identifying the problems, different diseases, swarm management, also getting the equipment that's actually the way that you process your honey that allows you to be more efficient. And eventually I said, well, I want more bees. That's what you're going to find with beekeeping is once you get into beekeeping, you kind of get hooked and addicted. You're like, I want more in a healthy way. And so then I put myself on Craigslist, free removal for free, bee removal for free. And so I'd get a bunch of calls during the swarm season. Generally, it's between February, March, April, and all the way to June, depending on the season. So I started going out and getting these beehives from people and building onto the collection, adding more and more as I went. Some would be large beehives, some would be small, so you have to baby them and work them up, nurture them up to health. And then once you have all these beehives, then you start making splits. You start splitting them, and I can go into what that means, but you just basically are multiplying your bees based off what you already have. You still at the same time you're bringing in beehives, you're getting calls. And that was while I was at the hospital. So I had a full-time job at the hospital, but I was doing this on the side. But I was really into it. And so eventually you have a surplus amount of honey. You're like, okay, well, I've consumed as much as I can. What do I do next? Let's hit the farmers markets. Let's, advertise. Let's keep it here in the community. So then I started to gain a following for just having good honey and good honeycomb. And so it was word of mouth at first throughout the hospital. They started buying. I want a jar here, I want a jar there. And so once we decided to form a business out of it, we decided to go by the name of Be Wild Collective. That's the name of our company. This is a separate platform from Lily's Eggs. I operate out of two different platforms. There's three of us, and we're all buddies, and we all have different skills. And so the collective is a word that we added onto the name because we're truly are trying to work collectively in a way that benefits us all. And as we do have different skills, we also want to incorporate that, not just bees. So that's what it has become. But for me, it was strictly bees at first. And then to go on more into beekeeping, I started gaining accounts with different people. After I left cottage, I connected with the nutrition director, and he said, hey, we hear you have this amazing honey. You're leaving us, but can you work with us? So now I have an account with cottage. They buy my honey. They sell it at the farmer's market that they do on Wednesdays. The same honey that you see on the table from Lily's is what I produce. 3 different farmers markets throughout the week. We're also now getting into doing events, honey tastings. We want to start making honey wine, which is mead, and spirits at that level. We've been also invited to some vineyards up in Los Olivos, so we're popping up over there and doing honey tastings, cutting boards, a little bit of cheese there, a little bit of wine. So honey goes really well hand in hand with wine. And so that's the latest. And at the same time, we want to just continue to strategically find ways to maintain good health, maintain the best health we can with our bees, and that's by using natural treatment, because bees do get sick. They get, different parasites. There's the one most common one, which is a varroa mite. A lot of practices out there are using chemicals to treat these diseases, so we're coming in from a different angle of working with nature. Also, we're going to try to eventually move in a direction of selecting our own genetics of bees that are more resilient to this area. But yeah, on that note, I think that's pretty much it on that. But there's a lot more to beekeeping, but I'll let you take on from here.
Man, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And it's raw. It's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I've always been fascinated by like raw milk, raw cheese, raw meat, and then you have honey. People forget about that, but it's also like part of the carnivore diet.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's fascinating because there's not too much raw animal products that you can eat, but honey is definitely one of them. Yeah.
I think it's so amazing what it is because it never goes bad.
Yeah. I heard this thing about the Egyptian where they found.
Yeah. I think there's even another one that dates, I think that was like 2,300 years. The other one that they found more recently was like, I don't know if it's 30,000 or 13,000 years, but it's just wild to think that this stuff never goes bad. Not only that, but it's very healing and it's antiseptic. It's got all these different properties. Technically, you can survive off honey, I feel like.
And it looks like gold.
It does. Yeah. And I can't wait to try some with you so you
Yeah.
can see all these profiles that I have with you today, mainly from Santa Barbara and Fillmore. And so we are really fortunate also in California to be beekeepers because the weather is almost perfect year
Yeah.
round. We do have a lot of different beekeepers that come to California during those colder months because other parts like, Idaho and Montana, they get really cold. So they either have to winterize their bees, and it's a lot of work and it's expensive, or they bring them down to California. And so as you go up north and you start to pay attention, you're going to see a lot of bee boxes on these different properties. And so it's a healthy thing that's going on right now. I think also more than ever, people are also starting to question the honey itself because there's a report that came out recently that 75 to 80% of honeys out there have some form of adulteration. So that's concerning.
Yeah.
And so I think that I'm starting to see more people come to the table and asking these questions and buying from us and getting to see the process.
All right. We're going to wrap it up.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And yeah, I hope people get inspired to look more into their nutrition and especially into raw honey. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Candy. Also, what you're doing here is really important for us. And I think, our generation is also kind of in a position where we need to lead the way with presenting this information and having these dialogues. It's a beautiful thing to be here. So thank you.
Of course, hit the farmers market, everybody.
Let's do it.
All right.